All right, so questions so far. All right, well, so I want to talk about your next ODP. I want to talk about if statements in Bash. Yes?
I have to do a question.
Cool.
In a while loop, for example, if I'm trying to have it check if it's like 1, 2, or 3, for example, is there any, would I write multiple loops, or could I do like 1, 2, 3, or something?
So you can do conditions. So let's just write something. So let's pretend we're trying to get an input from the user, and we want them to type in either the letter U or the letter C. Okay, so echo enter U or C, read their answer. Okay, do we want an and or an or here? While answer is not U and answer is not C, or while answer is not U or answer is not C? This is confusing. So what constitutes a good answer, right? If the answer is U or the answer is C, that's good, right? They've put in one of the things that they're supposed to put in. So the while loop, we're going to put in the condition which they've responded in a way that's not good. We're going to need to ask them to enter it again. So we want the complement of this. So we want to negate this. This is where De Morgan kicks in real life, right? Something or something, if you want to negate that, it's the negation of the first one and the negation of the second one. So if the answer is not U and the answer is not C, then they didn't put in a correct answer. And we want to loop again. So if while answer is not U and is not equal to C, do enter, try again, read answer, done. And then let's just show what you entered. So enter U or C. If you put in something weird, oh, I messed up. Echo. Okay, so if I put in an E, it says try again. If I put in that, if I put in an uppercase U. If I put in a C or a U, it says you entered C. And if I put in a U, it says you entered U. And anything else, it'll just keep asking me to try again. So if you're looking for a 1, 2, or a 3, you could do that 3 times. You could also use the fact that you're expecting a number, and you could do a comparison to make sure it's greater than or equal to 1, less than or equal to 3. And if you put in something that's not a number and you try to treat it like a number, it usually ends up being treated like a 0. So that would automatically be out of range, but you got 2 approaches there at least. Cool, other questions? All right, so I want to talk about the ODP. I want to talk about if statements in Bash. And I want to talk about the service learning project, okay, because your first deliverable for that is coming up in October, in about a week or 2. I think it's a week. And then I want to look at algorithms for doing this programming assignment 1, for doing the stick picking game. And that's going to lead us into a discussion about how to work on algorithms, how to develop pseudocode. And we're going to do some exercises in class writing pseudocode and looking at different versions of pseudocode and sort of deciding what's a better versus not as good balance between writing C code and writing very, very high level abstract pseudocode. So we're going to spend a while playing with that. Let's start with the ODP. So we are up to ODP 406. So 406, you're writing a script, okay, a bash script, that lets the user type in one number, okay? And you can assume that the number is a valid integer. You don't have to error check for the person typed in something other than a number. And assuming they type in the number 5, what your program should do is print out 5 vertical bars side by side, and then print the number 5 in parentheses. Okay, with that exact format, and then it exits. And you can assume they're not going to put in a negative number because that would just be weird. So they'll put in a number 1 or greater. Yeah.
So is that a command line argument or?
That's a input while the program's running.
Okay.
So they type in ODP 406 and hit enter, and then they type in the number, and then it prints out that. That's not right. 406. All right. So this I called it S1. So you run it and you put in the number 29, and it prints out 29 pipes, followed immediately by a left paren, the number 29, a right paren, and a new line. Right, and obviously this is part of PA1, right? This is what you have to do every time that the user takes a stick or the computer takes a stick, or you want to show the initial pile of sticks, you're going to produce a line of output like this. So you're writing the snippet of code that you could use to do this piece of programming assignment 1. Questions on that? All right, so let's take a look at if statements and other things. So I keep referring people to this cheat sheet. And some people have asked about for loops. So this is the syntax that works for a for loop. For loops are different from the other ones because we do fors inside double parentheses. And when you're inside those double parentheses for a for loop, you can do things like I++ or I less than 10. And you don't need the $sign in front of the I. But I usually don't talk a lot about for loops because they have this different syntax from other loops, right? When we're doing a while statement, if we want to compare things, we have to use -eq to see if two numbers are equal to each other. Fors are kind of an oddball. But you don't need a for loop in your repertoire, right? You can make for loops out of while loops. In fact, it's probably better to do that because then you're an expert in while loops. But if you want to spin a for loop, it looks very much like a for loop in C. But if you're doing this, don't accidentally try to do this inside a while loop because sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So if statements, just like a while, if space, bracket, bracket, space, some condition, space, bracket, bracket, new line, then things you want to do, and then on a new line, fi, which is the closing bracket for an if. If you want to do an if then else, it's if condition then, things you want to do for the condition, else, things you want to do in the else block, and then fi to end that. And if you want your else statement to have a different condition, you can do if condition then, things to do if condition is true. And then else if is one word, ELIF. Okay, ELIF, next condition then, things you want to do for that. That could be followed by another ELIF, and it could eventually be followed by an else if you want. And then the whole thing is closed out with an FI. So it's weird syntax, but it's just a plain old if statement, right? So we could have done this. We could have done this differently. So there's an if else, if then else statement for doing something similar to what we just did. So if the answer is U, then we're going to say you entered U. If it's C, we'll say you entered C. Otherwise, we'll say you entered something invalid. Now this doesn't loop, right? So it doesn't repeatedly ask you. But if we just wanted to take an input and see what it was, right, we can do that. You entered something invalid. You enter a U, you entered a U. We do a C, it says, oh, you entered a C. So the only tricky thing here, and it is fairly tricky, is nailing down the syntax, right? So all the spacing before and after, and so on. All right, questions on if or on anything Bash script related? Yeah.
Is there like a return kind of function that we could access like through Bash?
To get out of something?
Yeah, or to access a previous line of code.
So you can exit a script with exit,
Yeah.
right? And that'll kick you out right away. We don't really have go-tos. If you want to go back to a previous section, put it inside a loop of some kind. We can also do functions, and I'll show you how functions work because it's pretty straightforward. But it's not totally useful yet. But if you basically just want a function, right, you can say function, whatever the name of the function is, space, curly bracket, and then put in what you want the function to do, right? So echo hello. And if you call the function and you put arguments with it, right, those arguments are available as $1, $2, $3. So your first argument was $1, and then a closing curly bracket to end your function. So now if I just say name, it runs my function. And I didn't have an argument, so it tells me your first argument was missing. If I say name, this is fun, it says your first argument was this. So you can bundle things that are logically sort of one block of code into a function and then just call that function from somewhere, and that can help you modularize. What this doesn't tell you how to do is to pass things back from a function, and we'll get to that in a little bit later this week.
Question about that.
Yeah.
So when I do functions, I just edit the global variables, and then I just use those.
Yeah, that works.
Okay.
Yeah, so if your function sets the value of a variable, that's one way to get a value out. Yeah.
So the second one, your first argument was this. So this, because it's after name.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right, so there the first argument was AAA. There's also this thing $number, which tells us how many arguments the person specified. So the value of $number is how many arguments were given to the function. So if I say name, this is fun, it says number of arguments is 3. That works in scripts also. When you run a bash script, you can put arguments and pick those off with $1, $2, $3. $number tells you how many arguments there are, which can be useful. And there's a bunch of these that we can use, which we still have to talk about. Anything else? All right, let's talk about the service learning project. So, part of this course, so computer science, if you're here for the regular sequence, right, you're taking 224, 222 in winter, 223 in spring. It's a sequence of 3 courses. It goes from now until the end of June, or beginning of June. So it's about, I haven't added up, it's about roughly 40 weeks from the start of this to the end, at which point many of you are graduating. So the service learning project is a long-term project designed to basically run from now until you finish this 200 level CS sequence. And if you're an electrical engineering major, you're taking a series of 204, 252, 253 engineering courses, and those people are doing a service learning project that runs through that sequence. So this is a component that's being done by computer science and electrical engineering students. Okay, and everybody, when they're in usually their last year at Clark, they're taking the 200 level sequence in their major, they're working on a service learning project. And the idea of the SLP is to work on a project outside of your regular coursework. So most of the work that you do in your courses is in the form of assignments, right, or homework. And you're told, you know, here's 3 pages describing what programming assignment 3 should do. And here's, you know, how it should behave, and here's the purpose of it, and here's the test cases you should handle, and here's what you should report on it, and so on and so forth. It's all kind of spelled out for you. When you get a homework assignment, it's like, write up these questions from this section and, you know, turn them in this way. And that's an important part of your training in college, right, is following instructions and learning the material so you can do these things. But that's not the typical situation you're going to find on the job, right? If you're being paid an extraordinary sum of money to do something, it's pretty rare that your boss is going to come in and tell you exactly how to do it. Okay, first do this, and then do that, and then do this other thing, and here's the instructions you can follow, right? Because most employers aren't looking for somebody in engineering or computer science who can simply follow a set of instructions. They're saying, we need to create a database that will let us record this information and then correlate with that information and generate these TPS reports or whatever, right? And they want you to figure out how to do that, okay? So in general, in the workplace, you're working with a lot less sort of detailed instruction. And that's what the service learning project, that's one of the things that lets you develop, is the ability to take sort of a general plan and direct the work yourself, okay? And there's a lot to doing this. There's scheduling. Scheduling is huge, right? There's setting the scope of the project. So how much is it reasonable for me to do, and what is the timeline I'm going to follow to get this done? And there's coming up with what is it that I'm going to do? How am I going to, you know, achieve whatever it is that I've said my goals are? So there's doing research and looking at solutions and probably learning some stuff that you're not learning in your classes. So let's just say that you decide for your service learning project, I want to write a game. It's going to be a first-person shooter, and it's going to be a space game, and you're going to be able to float around in 3 dimensions, and I'm going to have some way to be able to control my direction with a joystick and a couple of buttons. Okay, and that's what you decide your goal is. You're going to have to learn a bunch of stuff. You're going to have to learn a gaming engine like Unity or Unreal or something. You're gonna have to figure out how to interface a joystick to whatever system you're using. You're probably not gonna do this in C, you could, but maybe you're gonna do this in Python or you know, C# if you're using an existing engine. And how do you interface the hardware to it, and what about the graphics and all this kind of stuff. There's all this stuff you're gonna have to figure out, right? And it's stuff that you generally won't get in your classes, so it's self-directed. And these are really, really valuable skills. These are the things that employers just eat up when they see this on a resume or they hear it in an interview, right? These are the things that will put you ahead of the other people who you're competing with for a job or a grant or a fellowship or admission to a graduate program or whatever you decide you're doing down the road. These are the skills that are most coveted. So the SLP is not designed to be a slam dunk. Okay, it's not something you can just sort of follow directions and you're done. It's really something that's going to take a lot of work. Okay, and you've got 3 quarters to work on it. You got 31 weeks of class time and a number of weeks in between quarters, so ballpark 40-ish weeks to get this thing. So that's the basic goal of the service learning project, right? Is to give you a chance to work on something larger scale, something that's self-directed, something that's outside the immediate scope of what you're already learning and doing assignments in your classes. Within those very broad parameters, what should your SLP be? It can be almost anything, okay? But it should be something that you're interested in spending all of this time and energy on. And this is the hardest part, is figuring out what do I want to do for this project that's going to take a lot of work and a lot of time and a lot of energy, and I'm going to have to balance with everything else for the next 3 quarters. And your goal this quarter is really to try to pin down what it is you want to do. You're not necessarily going to start making progress on it, but this is really the exploratory phase where you're trying to figure out, what do I want my project to be? And you're going to come up with, you're going to think about it for a while and come up with some sort of initial idea, and you're going to put that in a proposal, and you're going to start working on it, which is probably going to mean doing some research, seeing what does it really take to make this first-person shooter game with 3D motion, and you start digging into it, and you do some research and some reading, and you try some quick prototyping, and you say, the joystick thing is going to be a real pain. It's going to take me like, a year just to figure that out. So I'm not going to bother with a joystick. I'm just going to use keyboard controls. Okay, that's a really good thing to figure out. Or maybe you discover, I really like playing games. I don't think I like writing them. So I don't want to do this at all. Okay. Hopefully you figure that out in the first few weeks, and you can propose something else. And so this is not a linear process. This is not, okay, here's my plan, and I just do this much every day, and at the end of this, I'm done. Okay? It's a lot of back and forth. It's a lot of trial and error. It's about adjusting and adapting, and sometimes going all the way back to the start and picking a different direction. And these are more useful skills, right? This will happen in the workplace. This will happen in a research institution. But hopefully all of this happens more or less in this first quarter, okay? And the major setbacks hopefully happen sooner rather than later. And by the end of this quarter, you've got this really solid idea, okay? May not have done anything on it, but you've got enough that you could talk to somebody and explain to them in endless detail what it is that you want to do, not how to do it, right? But here's my idea, okay? So then at the end of this quarter, the Tuesday of the 10th week, or 11th week in this case, Tuesday of the last week, there's a little expo that takes place over in the Digital Lounge. It's 3 o'clock to 5 o'clock that last Tuesday. And everybody who's working on the SLPs will have turned in a 1-page poster that summarizes their project. And we print those out for you, and you take that poster and you go into the Digital Lounge, you find a table, and you just basically for 2 hours just hang out in there and talk to people about your project. And people come by and they'll see your poster and they're like, oh, this looks interesting, tell me what you're doing, or that kind of thing. Okay, and that happens 3 times this year, fall, winter, and spring. And the spring one is pretty big. Usually we get people from all over campus, we get people from outside of Clark coming and stuff like that. So that's the big picture view of the SLP. Questions about that so far before we start drilling into details? All right. So your proposal is going to look like this. So there's a template for you to fill out, okay? You've got to type it up, save it as a PDF, upload it through here by the due date. And the initial draft is due start of class October 11th. Start of class is set for 8 a.m. I'll change that. All right. So let's look at this template. Okay, so overview is what I just said. Choosing a topic, we talked about that. Instructions for the proposal. Okay, so your submission form is on the following page. So take this document, thanks, and chop off the top, right? Don't turn in the instructions because I already know them. Cut here, okay? So it starts here. And you can expand this as big as you need to fill in sufficient details, okay? So in the beginning, I want your name, Canvas name, class CSE 224, and the date that you're filling this in. The name of your project, pick a name. Doesn't have to be clever or fancy, it can be, but just what you're going to call your project. Okay, it's not set in stone, it's just something to refer to it by. And then if you're working with other people, list all of their names, full names, okay? Anytime you use any names, your name, anybody else's name in this course or any other course, use full names, first name, last name. Okay, we've got people in this class with the same last name. We've got lots of people with the same initials. So always, always, always first name, last name, unless you're like Prince or something and you're deliberately changing your name and going by one name. Okay, so list your partners if there's any, and then detailed project description. Okay, this is going to take more than the one line that I left here. Okay. Fill this in. This should be as much detail as you can provide about what your project is. Okay? Doesn't mean you're going to put in schematic diagrams for your circuit or source code for your game or something like that, right? Those probably don't even exist at this point. But tell me what your project is. Don't just say I'm going to make a first-person shooter in Unity. Give me more, right? If you know more, and you've got some time before this is due, try to think about more details. Right? So as much as you can put in. This is a service learning project, so it's supposed to be something that somehow serves others, serves the community, things like that. So think about what the service component is. And don't really be driven by that, okay? Do something that you want to do something that to you is fun and interesting and entertaining. But then think about what's the service component, and you can always find a service component. Video game helps students relax and de-stress so they can better concentrate when they get back to doing their homework, all right? So think about that. If this is a new project, say it's a new project. If it's something that you've already been working on, because some of us have pet projects that we're doing anyway, if you decide you're going to work on that, let me know what the current status of it is, right? So where are you starting from? All right. And then milestones. Milestones are really, really critical. So I want you to think a lot about this. A milestone is basically something that you're going to set in the ground and say, on this date, this is where I want to be. Okay? And I want at least 3 milestones listed for this, and you can put in more if you like. I'd like a mid-quarter milestone, which is around October 23rd. What would your milestone be? Where would you like to be by October 23rd? And then end of quarter, November 25th, where would you like to be at that point? And then pick some date beyond fall quarter. You know, end of the year, start of the winter quarter, you know, something. And tell me where you'd like to be at that point. And the reason for milestones is to help you set a schedule so that you know if you're on schedule, ahead, or behind. Okay, that's really important because a lot of times students go through their SLP, they go through this, they go through winter, they go through spring. It's 3 weeks before the end of spring quarter, they're getting ready to graduate, and they're like, yeah, I haven't really started on my SLP. Is that a problem? Okay, and it's a 40-week project. Or, you know, you've been working on it in good faith, you've been working on it an hour a day, but we're halfway through the quarter and you haven't really come up with what you want to do, right? You keep changing from one thing to another to another. Is that a problem? I don't know. Maybe it is, maybe it's not, right? But if your milestone says by mid-quarter I would like to have a project selected, and have researched it enough to be confident that I'm, you know, going to be able to do this, right? That tells you. If that's your end of quarter goal and your mid-quarter goal is to have a list of 5 projects to dig into more detail of, so I can choose one of those, right? Then you know that that's what you got to do by the middle of the quarter. So these need to be clearly defined and measurable. There's got to be a way that you or I could, on October 23rd, look at your milestone, look at your progress, and say you met the milestone or you didn't meet the milestone. Okay? And this is for you, right? You don't get graded on whether you meet your milestones or not. This is for you to know if you're on schedule. So some examples. First part done, that's not measurable, right? Maybe you know what the first part is, but pretend that, you know, you're handing this to your boss and they're deciding, are we going to keep you as an employee or are we going to fire you? If you're on schedule, we'll keep you. If you're not, we're going to fire you. First part done, what's the first part? What does that mean? The schematics are completed. Okay, that's a measurable milestone. Here's my schematics, or I don't have any schematics. Have a good idea what I want to do is not a measurable milestone. Complete a written description of the project that clearly states the project's goals. Yeah, here's my written description that clearly states the project goals. Okay, I met my milestone. Make sense? Okay, this is hard. This is one of these things that a lot of engineers never figure out. I've been in really painful meetings where people were asked to present their milestones and they just kind of, you know, stare at their hands and, you know, I don't have any milestones. It's hard to do, okay? Again, this is a really valuable skill. So end of quarter, what constitutes success by the time that you do your final upload, and then a milestone for the future. All right, so that's a key section. Major challenges anticipated and plans for addressing them. Looks like most game engines use C# or C++, and I don't know these languages. I'm going to have to learn them. I've heard that there's online courses you can take for free that will teach you these. I'm going to try to find one that takes less than 6 weeks and see if I can get a head start. I'm also going to go to my teacher and see if he's got a C++ book I can have, because he told us he's got lots of books in his office, which I do. Why did you choose this project? Okay, this is just whatever your motivation is. Couldn't think of anything. This was the first thing that occurred to me. That's fine. I've always wanted to do such and such. That's fine. But why did you choose this? What are your specific interests that relate to this project? Hopefully it's an interesting project to you. Hopefully it's not just, I gotta come up with an SLP, I guess. I don't know. I'll just pick something at random, right? Hopefully it's something that you're going to feel passionate about, because it can take a lot of time. Yeah?
What if it's really interesting, but it's not super difficult, or it doesn't take that much time? Could we do multiple of these, or is it just...
It should be one project, but you know, if there's something that's interesting and it's kind of a slam dunk, there's a good chance that it can be expanded on, right? And this is not you turn this in and you're done, right? You've got 3 attempts at this, okay, or 3 versions of this that you get to turn in. So you can talk to me about ideas ahead of time, okay, but not like the hour before this is due. You can talk about ideas ahead of time, you know, you can chat on Discord, of course, or whatever. And whatever you turn in, right, we'll probably talk about and say, okay, this is really good, but I don't think you're gonna be able to do cold fusion in one year. So let's, you know, pare it down. Or, you know, building your own PC is good, but that's probably not a 40-week task, right? So let's build on that and make it something with more components to it. So we can adjust. What do you hope to learn from this project? So it is part of a course curriculum, right? Hopefully there's some learning involved, and it's not just something that you're just going to go through the steps and not learn anything. And then what benefit do you think this project will have to you and your education? Okay. These can be annoying questions, but these are the kinds of questions that you're going to hear things like this in interviews or on applications for things like fellowships or programs or things like that, funding. So think about that, right? How is this going to help me? What am I going to learn? Is this a part of my education, right? What will I take away from this? And that can help you sort of decide, you know, is this really something I want to do for my 3-quarter project? Because it's a long time and it can be a lot of work. And in some cases, this can turn into something commercial for you down the road. Yeah.
So you kind of briefly mentioned the person that hypothetically didn't start until 3 weeks, you know, into its due date. So what would happen to that person if they did not have this?
So it's a component of the course, and it's worth points basically. Let me see, anything else I have to do on here? No. So it's just points basically. If you don't do anything on the SLP, then you lose points accordingly. So the SLP combined is 15% of your final grade. So the proposal is worth a total of 25 points. The final report at the end of the quarter is worth 50 points, and then the presentation is worth 25. So the proposal is a quarter of 15% course grade.
And so this would extend into the other.
So you do the same thing in the next quarter and the same thing in the next quarter. And if you don't do anything in this quarter, right, then in winter, right, you would have to do a proposal, but you would have missed, you know, 10 or 12 weeks worth of progress. So it gets harder and harder.
Okay.
And if you're only taking this course, if you're one of the few students who has already done the other course and you're just doing this one, then this is going to be a 1-quarter thing, basically.
If we have like multiple project ideas and we're not sure which we want to do,
Mhm.
can we get multiple proposals and like get your feedback from which one you think?
Sure, that would be great. You can do that, or you can just come and talk to me if you don't want to write up multiple things.
Okay.
We can talk about different ideas and go from there. Yeah.
So when it says like presentation over there, that's referring to like being out in the common area with the posters, or is that like actually presenting it to class?
So the presentation, December 3rd, that's the one out there in the common area. Okay. Yeah. And if you cannot make this, you have to let me know this week. Okay, in writing, send me an email. In fact, I'm going to put this in here right now. All right. So if you work and you have to work Tuesday afternoons, or you know for some other reason you can't be at school on Tuesday afternoons, let me know ahead of time. Okay, like this week, because inevitably, you know, the day before this, somebody will come in and say, "Yeah, I work every Tuesday afternoon. I can't come tomorrow." Right. So let me know ahead of time. Or if something happens, if your job changes in 3 weeks and now you have to work Tuesday afternoons and there's no way you can get that off, let me know, okay? Because we definitely want everybody to come to this. All right, and your final report, your actual upload, we'll talk about this when it gets closer, but basically it's just this 1-page PowerPoint that you fill in with your project title, date, the people who are in the team, and then these different sections. And we can talk about this as you get closer, but it's basically just a high-level view of what your proposed project is. All right, so your proposal is due October 11th, which is a Friday. And then I'll look that over on the weekend and I'll give you feedback, and if I feel like you need to make some additional changes to it, I'll ask you to submit another version by the 16th, okay, which is the following Wednesday. And if there's issues with that, I'll point them out to you and ask you to submit a final version by the 18th, which is Friday. And the whole proposal is worth 25 points. So if you do the version 1 and that looks fine, right, then I'll go ahead and give you the 10 points and 5 points for the other ones. If version 1 needs some work, I'll give you 10 points for that, and then I'll give you the other points as you turn in the other pieces. So it's 25 points total, and you may not have to do all 3 versions. So project ideas. If you go down the hallway towards the nerd cave and other parts of the building, there's all these posters sitting on the wall, right? Those are people's past SLPs. That can give you some idea of sort of the scope of projects that people have done. It can be a pure software project. It can be a combination of software and hardware. It could be something really off the wall. Okay, I had one student one year who decided to explore what it would be like to develop a number system that instead of being base 2 or base 10 was base infinity. All right, this was something that came out of a discrete structures lecture. And she took the idea and ran with it. And that was her SLP, right? I think she eventually published a paper on it when she was at the university. So it can be kind of all over the place, okay? The most important thing is that it's something that you're interested in doing, and that it's something that you can stick with and will take the whole time. And you don't want to switch every quarter or a few times a quarter from one project to another. So we want to, this is in some sense the most important part of the whole project, is deciding what you're going to do, right, as it generally is. All right, so questions about SLPs? All right, so I'll put one thing out there. So when I was like 7 or 8 years old, for Christmas, we got this thing called Clancy. Clancy is a skating monkey. Clancy is sideways, sorry. And you drop a quarter in the hat, and Clancy starts to walk with a little bit of help. So Clancy's like 50 years old, right, half a century. And he's been in our family for, half a century. And my mom had him, and she was getting worried, like, what happens when she can't keep Clancy anymore? She really wanted someone, so I took Clancy anyway. So Clancy is in my office. He's standing next to Einstein. And my plan is to make him rechargeable, because he eats batteries and they leak and all this kind of stuff. So I'm going to make him rechargeable. I'm going to throw in something like a Raspberry Pi into his foot and hook it up to his motors and some sensors. But then I don't have any specific ideas beyond that. So if somebody or a group of people are interested in hacking up a roller skating monkey to do whatever you might decide it should do, I'm going to make Clancy available for your whatever purposes you decide. Okay, so this can only be one person or one group probably. But think like an Engineering 270 EdBot, but in the form of a roller skating monkey instead. He's about that tall. So that's out there as an option. All right, other questions? How's PA1 coming? All right, so tomorrow let's start by looking at specific algorithms for doing this mesh sticking game. I want to start looking at pseudocode, okay, high level stuff, not the actual bash code, but sort of high level description of how we can play this stick picking game. In particular the part where the computer makes move and the user makes move, and you sort of decide how to choose how many sticks so that the computer can win. Okay, and that'll take us into talking about pseudocode in general. So the rest of this week, I want to talk about VI. I want to talk a little more about Git. I want to talk about customizing our environment and looking at some of these things like PuTTY and Linux and Bash and VI and C and sort of pin down exactly what these things are, because terminology gets kind of confusing sometimes, and we're going to use these terms a lot, so I want to sort of spell out exactly what these things are. And then we'll go back to playing around with the Linux file system, and we'll start digging deeper into tools. So that's probably our plan this week. All right, cool. I will see you next time.